Hello and welcome to Rays of Hope, brought to you by the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. I'm your host for today, Mary Foley, and I'm so glad that you've joined us because the topic today is of great importance, and I think you're going to learn a lot and come away feeling knowledgeable about how to handle situations that you encounter as they pertain to violence against women. It's an epidemic, and here to talk about the epidemic, the scope of the problem, and the solution is Carla Sizemore from Merryman House Domestic Crisis Center. Thank you so much for joining me today. You are the Assistant Director of the Merryman House.
That's correct.
Could you tell me just a little bit about yourself and about Merryman House and the services that you provide to the area?
Oh, absolutely. I've been with Merryman House approximately 6 months. I am the Assistant Director. My background is in, I have a degree in education and a degree in family studies, marriage and family therapy. I'm just very honored to be where I am. It's a wonderful place to work, and I'm excited about the services that we do offer. Presently, we do have a shelter in McCracken County.
Okay.
We have 30 beds, 35 if you count the cribs and the playpens that we pull out when we need to, because often we are at full capacity and we need to do that. We provide food and shelter, and then we also try to assist women with housing, legal advocacy. A lot of times when they have a court appearance, it's very important to have someone just to be there with you, so we try to be there in that regard.
I see. So it sounds like you all provide an array of services, and I'd like to take some time to sort of break those down for the viewing audience, because I think some viewers may be thinking, no, wait, what? Domestic violence, McCracken County? I watch that on maybe Lifetime Movie Network, or maybe I read about it occasionally, but is there really a need for a shelter in McCracken County? And so I guess your slogan is every home a safe home. And I think it's what we would all hope for, but really what is the scope of the problem in terms of unsafe homes in this area? Is it a big deal?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it is a huge problem. And I know we were talking earlier, I stopped through a drive-through yesterday, and the woman who waited on me, who's waited on me many times, I noticed that she had a black eye and a swollen face, and perhaps she was in a car wreck. But I have concerns. And the scope, a lot of times people don't make it public. It may be an embarrassment issue, it may be a fear issue for the person, but it's out there. And I can attest to the number of calls we get every day. We get so many crisis calls. A lot of people don't come into shelter. They choose just to think about it and may call back, but we give them resources. A lot of people may choose to go through our outreach services.
So explain those to me. When you say an outreach service, what does that mean in terms of the services you provide?
Okay. We have an outreach program here in McCracken County. Then we have one in Murray, Kentucky. We also have one in Mayfield. And these are programs where you don't actually have, move into the shelter, but you can access our resources. So you may receive some assistance with rent, for example, or trying to find housing, affordable housing, just a variety of problems. If you're in the middle of a court case and you need someone to advocate for you, or just to be there with you in the courtroom, because for many, many women that's such a scary place.
I can imagine.
If you're facing your perpetrator, it can be terrifying, and someone just to stand there with you sometimes means a lot.
Oh, I'm sure. So it sounds like you sort of have two arms in that you provide the opportunity for those women who may be in an abusive relationship to access you as they need in an outreach or outpatient, for lack of a better term, way. But you also have a way for folks to literally leave their home and you're going to take care of them. Can you talk to me about what that looks like?
Absolutely. And the Merryman House it's just a wonderful, large house that has been converted into this shelter. And I say wonderful, and it is, and we're so proud of our facility, but we are cramped. I can't deny that. One of the bedrooms in our basement, it was I think it had been a living room at one time, and it has been converted into what we call a bedroom, and there are 13 beds in there.
Wow.
I'm not talking about luxurious beds. We have bunk beds and things you think of your your 10-year-old sleeping on. But we make do, and I'm so impressed by the way the women get along so well in such close quarters.
Sure.
Which is not to say it's not stressful at times. But it is a home atmosphere. We have a kitchen. They're free to come in and, and get food as they would at home. We try to make it as comfortable as we can.
Okay. And so you also mentioned that you do take children.
Yes, we do.
And why would that be important for perhaps an individual watching to know that you take children and that's not going to be a problem? Why is that important? Is that ever an obstacle or a concern?
Oh, absolutely. So many women are concerned about, well, if I leave, what will happen to my children?
Sure.
And will there be a place for my children? And if my children come with me to the shelter, will they be safe? And are there any services for the children? And that's an area where we're really trying to work on providing more services for the children, education, and helping them to process their feelings and talk about what it's like for them, because it's very difficult for a child to be in a shelter. They have to adjust to new people all around them. Oftentimes they have to start a new school. And they've just been in a really stressful situation. They may have left a pet. Their best friend may have lived next door.
I see.
So there are lots of challenges when children come in.
Obviously, and yet I think you already spoke to the importance of it can't be more difficult than living in the abusive situation. So when you say services, when the women and children arrive at your shelter, what kind of services then are available to them once they've made that difficult transition?
Okay. Well, what we do when they come in is we do an intake and just a basic kind of a needs assessment and talk to them about what they need. And we try to let them, our goal is to let them be in charge of their lives. They don't come in and we say, and you need to do this and this and this.
Okay.
We ask them what they feel like they need and what they want us to help them with. I think a lot of times their power has been taken away.
Sure.
And so we try to approach them from an empowerment standpoint and help them gain the self-sufficiency that they want and work on their self-esteem, letting them know that they can, they do have the power, and we're here to assist them. Some of the things we do assist them with, as you've asked, we may assist them with getting some medical services. Some women have been very isolated. They don't have education that they need to perhaps get employment in an area that they would like, so we assist them with completing GEDs or going back to school.
Wonderful.
We assist them with housing. We have some wonderful housing programs. We have a tenant-based housing program. We have a permanent housing program. Just several going on that I'm so excited about. And one of the things we looked at earlier is statistically we've gone, year before last we had 7 housing advocacies, and then this past year we had I think over 300. We may look at that.
That's phenomenal. Yes, and so you've talked about the fact that you offer in McCracken County there is a safe home where women can go. They can be assisted in a variety of ways.
Absolutely.
And it sounds to me like very concrete, logical need ways, like education, medical treatment, housing transition plans, all those sorts of things. And then you've talked about those that aren't yet ready to make that move, that they have those resources available on an outreach office where they can get it as needed. So the services are there, but you've talked about this, that this is a big problem. And so I'd like for you to talk about last year, and I think we actually are going to have this for the viewer to look for themselves. Last year's numbers, what did that look like, and how big of a problem is domestic violence in McCracken County?
The figures are just staggering in my mind. Last year the Merryman House served 316 victims of domestic violence in terms of them receiving emergency shelter at our Paducah location. 1,408 individual and 1,120 group counseling sessions were provided to women and children just at our Paducah location.
That's amazing.
869 victims of domestic violence received counseling through our 3 outreach offices.
So even though they didn't come in, they were receiving services as needed.
Exactly. And we're really working to make sure that those numbers of counseling and individual sessions continue to rise, that we provide those, because we know there is a need, excuse me.
It seems like you all served an amazing amount in crisis situations there. 859 crisis calls received on the line. Over 1,300 additional callers received information, but maybe weren't necessarily ready to access your services. What else?
Exactly. And some people call in because they have concerns about, a neighbor or a friend, and we try to give some informational tools and services in that way. Also, we have 528 victims of domestic violence were provided legal advocacy. 146 families dealing with domestic violence in their home received housing advocacy, emergency financial assistance to relocate to a safe location.
Those numbers are shocking. I, obviously work in a service agency, the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. We deal with crime as you do every day, and with people that are victims of crimes that are not easily discussed. And yet I'm shocked at how many people are in an abusive or even a dangerous or life-threatening situation here in our area. I tell you, Carla, though, after looking at those numbers, the message that I would come away with if I were a viewer is that these women are not alone. What would you say to viewers just about, in general, before we take a break, about the problem and what you think the community needs to know in terms of domestic violence?
Well, I think the continuing education and programs like this, and we're so grateful that you invited us to participate today, because we do want to get the word out. Education, becoming aware, and becoming involved. Certainly we need, we're open to donations or volunteer time, anything that people can offer. We're also attempting to participate in more fundraisers, those kinds of things. But I would just like the community to know that, unfortunately, domestic violence is alive and well in this community. And unfortunately, I suspect it will continue to just continue until we really become involved and aware. So the awareness for me is the huge issue. Exactly.
We have just a few minutes before we take a break, and on the other side of the break, I would like for you to educate us on what the characteristics are of an abusive relationship or of an abused woman, and then we'd like to give a safety plan and some things for those folks to consider that may be watching and may be relating to what you're saying, either personally or through a friend. But quickly, before we do that, how do you anticipate that those numbers or those statistics from last year might change this year?
Well, and I expect the numbers actually to rise. Part of it is people becoming more aware of the resources, and then the continuing violence because of those two factors. One of the things I'll add here that we're so proud of, and I may have mentioned before, but the housing. Last year we had 7 housing advocacies. This year we have 196.
So they're already increasing and already going up.
Yes, and that is so exciting for us because a woman and her children, or a woman by herself, can come into shelter and we can help her while she's there. But if we send her out and she doesn't have a place to live or a way to take care of her family, her chances of success are much slimmer.
I see. So you expect those changes in continuing assistance even after leaving the shelter?
Absolutely.
I think that's an excellent point, and it's a great point for us to take a break. We invite you to stay with us. We have critical information for you, and information that I think that you're going to find helpful, so please don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rays of Hope, brought to you by the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. I'm your host, Mary Foley, and our guest today is Carla Sizemore from Merryman House Domestic Crisis Center. Again, thank you so much for being a part of the show today and getting this information out.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, we've been talking about the services that you provide an outreach program, and you provide shelter services, and in that are tons of other ways that you assist individuals who are in need of help with an abusive situation. And you have revealed some shocking statistics up to this point. What I would like to do in the second half of this program is talk specifically to the viewer and perhaps the woman that is watching that maybe down inside knows things are not as they should be, and just the characteristics, I guess, of an abused individual or of a dangerous relationship. So if you could just begin to educate me and also the viewer about what does an unhealthy or an abusive relationship look like? Or what does an abused individual, what are some symptoms that they may portray?
And some of the symptoms that you may notice or characteristics would include low self-esteem. Traditionally, you may find a woman who strongly believes in family unity and the male is the head of the household. A lot of times the abused woman will accept responsibility for the batterer's actions. She may suffer from guilt and along with that still deny the terror and the anger that she feels.
So guilt must be a normal emotion and an obstacle that they encounter.
In this situation. A lot of times she will present a passive face to the world, but has the strength to manipulate her environment enough to prevent further violence and being killed. She has severe stress reactions often. Often the abused woman will believe she is the keeper of the peace and will attempt to control other people and events in the environment to keep her husband from losing his temper. She may come from a background in an abusive family. She may feel very isolated and have a high need for approval, attention, and affection. And a lot of abusers do isolate their victims. Passivity in the relationship or dependency in the relationship is often a common characteristic as well.
So Carla, you know, some of these symptoms may be present without there being an abuse situation going on. How would you help someone balance that if they say, well, I have low self-esteem or I sort of have the personality that keeps the peace, but I don't know that I'm in an abusive relationship? How would you help them sort through that?
Well, and it would be something that is on an individual basis, because as you say, just because you have you know, one or two or more symptoms of the characteristics we listed, it doesn't mean you're in an abusive relationship. So I would ask questions about what the person they're in an intimate relationship with, how they're treated by that person. So we would look at those characteristics as well, and then feelings about how they feel about the relationship and themselves within the relationship.
So then on the flip side, we may have a viewer or a friend of somebody else that says, oh my gosh, this sounds like me, this sounds like my friend, this sounds like my aunt or my cousin. What are some feelings that would be common that they might be experiencing right now, and what would you say to them in response to that?
If there was someone worried about it, concerned about a friend or a family member, I would support them in talking about that and in their endeavor to assist the person. One of the things I could do, we could give them some information that they might share with a friend at the appropriate time. I would encourage them to be very careful about information they give to the person, reading material. That's not something you would want lying around the house probably, just in case the abuser found it. That might make things a bit worse. But to inform them about the center, the services, our crisis line, we have a 24-hour crisis line, and they can call it any time. And there's no obligation. You don't even have to give us your name.
And I think that number is actually available right now.
Yes, absolutely. The 1-800-585-2686, and that's toll-free. If you're in the Paducah area, or you may have area calling, it's 270-443-6001.
And so you say that this is confidential, there's no obligation, they can It's just there should they need it.
Absolutely.
So let's say we have viewers that are watching that they know I'm in an abusive relationship. I meet the majority of these criteria. And maybe, you know, they don't really know what to do. What are some common obstacles that women encounter, or reasons why they tell themselves, I don't need to get help?
And there's so many reasons. We can touch on just a few. A lot of times it's financial. How will I take care of myself? How will I support my children? Perhaps they've been told that they'll never get a job. They're, you know, no one would want to be with them or want to help them. They may feel like this is the only relationship I'll ever have, and as bad as it is, maybe it's better than nothing at all.
I see.
So there's some psychological brainwashing oftentimes from the perpetrator or the abuser. A lot of times, a lot of women may not have education, the education or the knowledge as far as where do I go to get my education? How do I do that if I want to further myself and get some job training? And don't get me wrong, it certainly, this is across the board, all socioeconomic levels, races, it's everywhere. You know, the wealthy, the very poor, middle class, it's everywhere.
The educated, the non-educated.
Educated, non-educated.
It's no respecter of persons, I guess, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
So those are some common thoughts and feelings that individuals may be experiencing right now. And so would you say that maybe one of the least, I guess, offensive ways that they could react would just be to gather information, call your crisis line, talk with someone who can empathize with what they're going through and help them make that informed decision?
Exactly.
Is that really the first step?
Exactly. Now, and if a lot of times things escalate and you end up in an emergency situation, so it's so good to plan ahead. And I know we are going to mention a safety plan.
Well, let's go ahead and do that. If someone does find themselves in an emergency situation, or they see that they could potentially encounter an emergency situation, what are some good checklist things for them to keep in mind? What safety plan do you recommend?
Well, and there are multiple things that we do recommend, and I know they're on an individual basis. We'll go over the checklist, and then I'll add just briefly to that. It's always good to gather personal information and have that ready to go at the drop of a hat.
Okay.
Things like identification, driver's license, children's birth certificates, your birth certificates, social security cards, welfare information. And I do want to emphasize that so many people come into shelter, they have none of those papers. And so we have to start from ground zero,
So that's
trying to get social security numbers, cards, and birth certificates for the children to get them in the school systems.
Okay. What about financially?
Also money, credit cards, if you can, you know, have some money saved, your bank books, your checkbook, those kinds of things. Also, if you have a protective order, keep it with you at all times, and then lease, rental agreements, house deed, card title, registration, insurance papers, health and life insurance policies, medical records for you and your children's school records.
Okay.
Work permits, green cards, visa, passports, divorce, custody papers, marriage license, all of those type things are good to have.
And then it looks like there's just some miscellaneous things that I don't know that folks would remember to consider. So could you go over those with us too?
And that's why it's so good to think ahead and have these all together. House, car keys, medications, jewelry, address books. Like you may have a piece of jewelry that was your great-grandmother's and it's very special to you. Pictures of you, your children, and your abuser. That's also good to have.
Okay.
And some things for your children, toiletries, diapers, children's small toys, change of clothes, arrangements for your pet if you have a pet.
I see. So lots to consider, but certainly something that you all would be able to go over with individuals if they should call your crisis line.
Exactly.
Carla, we're almost out of time today.
Okay.
It goes by so fast. You've given us some wonderful information. Let's just take a moment to talk to the viewer that may be watching the show, just a regular viewer who says, you know what, I'm not in this situation, but I want to help people that are in that situation that maybe don't have the time to gather this stuff. So you guys have a wish list, and we have that available for the viewer to look at. Let's talk about that. Could you hit some highlights of things that people can donate to help you.
Okay, and the list is up on the board here. We do need trash bags always, dishwashing soap, food. We need food. Canned foods are so good, or boxed foods, those kinds of things. Toothpaste, shampoos, paint. Often we need paint. The towels, the sheets, those kinds of things.
Just housing materials.
Exactly.
So if people want to help Merryman House with things like disposable razors, gift cards, I think some paper plates, postage, house shoes, clothing, ways to fill their gas tank, some just pastime items, toiletries, hygiene products, things like cash and cell phones. If people want to do that, how do they do that quickly? What's the process?
They can call the number, the 443-6001, or the 800 number, and we can arrange for them to bring those items in, or we can even go pick them up.
Okay, so there's ways to help.
Exactly.
I think one of the ideas was to take, if you go on a trip and you go to a hotel and you keep the shampoos and lotions, those are good for you all to have.
Oh, they're wonderful for the shelter.
Well,
they're
that's
wonderful.
great. Is there any closing thoughts or thank yous that you'd like to give to folks? I know you mentioned that this is a team effort as we wrap up today. Any closing thoughts that you might like to share with the viewer?
Well, I'd just like to, first of all, thank you again for having us on your show and to talk about Merryman House. And also, would like to thank PCM, Paducah Cooperative Ministries, who we work with, and the shelters around the areas, our board of directors, law enforcement agents, law officers who have been such a help at times, at the Rape Crisis Center, which I know now has a different name, but you all have been so helpful to us.
Well, it's our pleasure to assist everyone. So thank you so much for the dual collaborative relationship that we have in assisting women and addressing the issue of violence against women. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of Rays of Hope. Should you need more information, please feel free to contact the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. We can also connect you to Merryman House Domestic Crisis Center. Our number is 1-800-928-7273 is our 24-hour helpline, or you can call us locally as well at 534-4422. And until next time, we hope that you will continue to educate yourself and become involved with issues in the community.